Well, welcome. It's that time of year where we start talking about how we're going to spend your money, because it is taxpayer dollars. Luckily, we've got a great history that the town meeting members, all 200 plus, have steered us well, and we've had good financial decisions. It's getting tighter, and you'll see this year, it's the tightest year we've had in a couple decades, since 2003. So why don't we start with introductions?
Chris Moore, member of the Finance Committee.
Mike Walsh, a member of the Milford Select Board.
Andy Lazat on the Finance Committee as well.
We've got 31 articles to go through in 58 minutes, so let's get started. Article 1 on the town warrant, and by the way, for the 6 people who watch, the Finance Committee report with the background.
I'm recording this, so that's 7.
Is on the website, so you can have access to it, and all the information we were given about individual articles is also on there. Okay, obviously Article number 1 is just the town meeting reports. So any of the department heads, the Finance Committee will be giving a State of the Union type address. Did the Select Board give a report?
No.
I can't remember them doing that.
No.
Article 2, wages and salaries.
Article 2 is a standard article that comes up every single year. Al, as you know that. Article 2, the Personnel Board works with everybody on that to try to establish wages and salaries for that. It's something that Jerry Moody doesn't like me to call housekeeping, but it's a housekeeping article at this point because with the great work of the legal department, selectmen, Article 2 is handled, and obviously it just needs town meeting approval.
And realistically, the average increase is about 2.9% this year.
Yeah.
And sometimes people get confused because you'll see employees at the town meeting book that's handed out at town meeting, the annual book. You'll see raises of 6%, 7%.
And this is where you say chutes and ladders.
This is where I say chutes and ladders. It's lanes, because you can move up a lane if you get a year's extra experience, a step. You can move a lane if you go and add like a PhD to your CV. Then you get the 3% on top of that.
Yeah, and it's years of service as well, same thing. So the more years of service that an employee serves in our town, the more compensation that they get, which is obviously deserved. But Al's exactly right. So when you look at it, some people may see a raise higher than that,
Yeah.
but that's not necessarily the case for Article 2 as a whole.
When we move to Article 3, that's elected officials. Again, in the Finance Committee's report, you'll see the history, because people have always asked me, well, what's the history of the position? So we start with fiscal year 15, and I put in what the rates were, all the way up to the proposed 25. On average, looks like about 2.9% is the average increase for elected officials.
And again, Al, as everybody knows, you know, that article and the previous article come up every year at the May town meeting.
Yeah, and it's important that everybody understands, town meeting giveth and town meeting taketh away.
Right.
So the only way you can spend any money is to have town meeting approve it. And the last articles, we'll see leftover money. Because it's always funny when people say, seriously, you made an article, a motion for $32? It's like, you have no choice. It could be for $1. If it's left over from an article to build $1 million bridge, you got to take it back, and the only ones that could give it are the only ones who can take it back, which is town meeting. So Article 3, I think the important part is that on average it's about a 2.9%. And it does, in the town annual report, the book, it lists every employee's salary. So I think people are pretty surprised that the select board gets those amazingly large $7,000 salaries, you know, realistically, you're not even making minimum wage.
I mean, honestly, God, I mean, seriously, for what this gentleman does and the other two,
There's
Minimum
only two
wage.
boards paid less.
well,
Finance committee and
I
school
know, I
committee.
noticed we weren't on there. Andy, where's your check? Did you get that or
We're
not?
gonna-
I think
we're
we
gonna-
average 0.
Yeah, we're gonna ask for a 20% raise for all FinCom members.
No, but
Since
you,
we're getting
but you talk
zero-
about gentlemen like Mikey here, who takes phone calls all the time, who constantly serves his community. Anyone who wants to argue about $7,000, I'll go to the mattress with you because he earns
Yeah, that's why I
10
say you
times
don't
that.
quite make minimum wage.
exactly.
Article 4, it's giving the select board the power to raise 285 million, which is an amazing number.
Do you remember when we were 98 and we
I-
thought it was a huge deal to go over
This
100?
show started
Do you
because we
remember?
were 70 million when you first came on. And I felt bad that the townspeople, except for a couple hundred town meeting members, never knew what we spent it on. So we started this show just to go over the articles because it was $70 million. And I said back then, when I grew up, you could have bought Milford for $70 million. They would have
They
thrown
throw it in
Hopedale.
Hopedale.
Yeah.
I got them all. I got them all.
You've heard
I'm
'em
going to do
all.
them all the whole time.
Now,
No,
now-
but-
now,
but-
Al, just a word of caution on this. I mean, Article 4, we're talking about a 6.22% increase in
Yes.
the budget, right? And that clearly exceeds the growth in the tax base in the town. So we have to have some caution that this does not become a recurring
And
event.
that's one of the
every year.
things that we faced back when we did this in 2003, because we were running 6%, and we said, if you look at the lines, if you keep going up 6%, and the maximum you can do is 2.5, even though new growth and all that factors in, eventually the lines cross.
Yes.
So we do have to be very careful.
Well, Al, as you and I were talking earlier, it's very simple. You can fund this, but it's coming from somewhere, because there's only so much money to spend. So, you know, that's the important thing that people have. It's no different than running your home. It's just a larger version of it. You know, yes, you know, you want to have this. We understand that, you know, we want it as well, but where is it coming from? This is how much we got to spend. This is what, you know, the articles are asking for,
And this year was the first time in
to Andy's point.
a decade or so that Zach put together with us a budget. And then we looked and said, but there's $10 million worth of extra asks
Right.
that we don't have the money for. So 4 new firefighters, we had to talk to the chief. And my hat's off both to Chief Tassino and Chief Nelson, because they didn't take the position that we need it and there's nothing you can do. They understood that we don't have the extra $10 million. We have to cut it back. And hopefully next year, the year after, might be a little better. But we've got another issue coming up in Article 23 where, what you say, you can spend it here or you can spend it there,
Right.
but you can't spend it in both because you don't have the money.
And the other thing, Al, is that, you know, it's important that people understand is that for a long time, because Milford has always been financially very strong, you know, we had a tendency to, you know, but there was always the conversation that someday, well, someday is here.
Well, and that's the
Someday is
key
here.
because you think about it. I've been saying there's a school coming, you know, and they came in Brookside and we got away with not tapping stabilization. Woodland, we got away. But the high school, when we talk about the feasibility study, we're going to be talking about $180 million
Right.
to renovate a high school. My personal opinion, it's based on nothing but my opinion. We're not going to do a new school at 350.
Yeah.
You know,
Where are you going to put it?
Yeah, exactly.
well, that's one of the issues we'll talk about. because if the only place you can put it is Asylum Street. And that's gonna be a challenge.
Now, I just want to reiterate, and I did it at the Finance Committee, and I think it's important, and Mike very much laid it out. And you actually did as well. For the first time ever, we're dipping into our excess levy capacity.
Yes.
And we're dipping into our excess levy capacity by 33%.
Yep.
I want every taxpayer to know that what the excess levy capacity is because it's pertinent to Article 4, that's our savings account. That's what we didn't tax them. We're taking 33% of what we didn't tax them before, and we're going to tax them now, and we still haven't paid for the school. This is just regular expenses. And I understand because, hey, I grocery shop, you grocery shop, you grocery shop. I mean, you go to Hannaford's and you walk out and you're like, what just happened right now?
Yeah.
You know?
Where's the caviar in my...
Seriously.
Yeah.
And the town, and that's the other thing, is I want the taxpayers to know that the town faces that too. Whether it's fuel costs, employment costs, maintenance costs, we feel the increase that you feel when you go to the grocery store too. We feel it as a town.
And we're lucky that
You
the
know?
department heads really work with us. Because there's a lot of
Absolutely.
towns that when you read, school committees fighting the select board,
Yep.
the police are threatening, the fire's threatening. We don't have any of that.
Yep.
And we're still getting awful close.
Well, remember the year that, for example, we did the ladder truck at the 1.1 million, and the chief came right back with the second fire truck at 650. And I know that it was, you and Chris that went to Billy Toohey and said, we can pay for that, but any chance I can put it off for a year, no problem.
TUI Rev 1
Conversation.
came back and said, I can get a year more or 2 years more, but you got to promise me that if I stretch it for 2 years, the money's got to be there.
Right,
Because at that point, I don't have a choice.
right.
And that money for the ladder truck, the 1.1 million, we had put into the short-term
Short-term
stabilization,
stabilization.
saying the day we need it, when the chief says, yeah, now's the time, it's right there. Now, we were lucky because we paid for that truck out of excess cash, so.
But to your point, Al, it's department heads and boards all working
Phenomenal.
together.
Yep.
I just want the voters to know that not only when they go to McDonald's that like a Happy Meal is now $18. Understand that the town, when we buy things, it's
Same.
now $18.
We got the same pressure.
It's $18 too. And I want them, when they see their tax bill, understand it's not anything that we're doing differently. It's just the fact that things are more expensive.
Absolutely.
Okay, we get to Article 5. Do you want to annoy Jerry Moody, or you going to call it housekeeping articles?
It is a housekeeping article.
To
once
Jerry's credit, he kept telling us it's not housekeeping, it's reoccurring. Well, we used to have 6 different articles or 7 different articles and vote on each one. They were all the same every year. So we lumped them together, and I mean, there were things like the treasurer to collect money or
To do their
negotiate-
job.
To do their job. The selectmen to do their job. A select board.
And we were favorable on all that. So
The 6th one is my favorite article.
potato
Oh,
chip
man.
money.
The potato chip money.
No vending machines.
The vending machines in the high school. We have vending machines in the high school. That money is taken in, but again, town meeting giveth and town meeting taketh away. They collect the money, it goes into the general fund, and town meeting has to authorize. And if I remember, it's like $4,000 a year. It's not major money.
It's a little over 4,000.
So, and the
200
town
of it's my
meeting
kids, by the way.
authorizes it for student activities. So it's not like you're spending it on cupcakes and stuff for the staff. It's meant for student activities. Number 7, police dispatch contract.
a no-brainer. We have to do it. We gotta settle it.
Yeah, I think what people don't understand is, it's not a negotiation. If, Mike, I'm gonna negotiate with you, I have 3% to spend. Well, where do you think you're gonna start?
Right.
You know, so what we do is we budget 0, and then let the negotiators negotiate. And then here on Article 7, we need $86,000 to cover the increase.
Right. This is a number that has been agreed on.
Right.
Between the union, dispatchers union, and the Board of Selectmen.
But we don't tell them what the number is.
No.
It's like, let's play poker and I'll show you my hand.
No, it's a typical negotiation. They come forward to us first. We review it, decide, what we think is appropriate, and it goes back and comes back, and we finally we come to an agreement. We come to
Once they have
consensus.
the agreement, Zach calculates, because it's for 2 years.
Right.
It's last year and this year, we have to balance their budget, so it's
Yeah.
$86,000.
Right, and again, there's not just the select board involved in it. Zach's involved in it. Chris Moran is involved in it. Mr. Rick Vellani's involved. The town council's involved in it. The police chief's involved. A lot of people are. So it's a lot of moving pieces.
Article 8 is a brew pub definition. Anybody want to talk about that?
Nope.
It's basically putting a definition.
Andy?
Not really.
No.
You're
I don't know
putting
if
a
I-
definition on where you can have brew pubs and what is a brew
Exactly.
pub.
We refer to sponsors. I mean, and Al, you know this. I mean, there's always a bunch of articles that really do not have a financial impact.
Right.
They don't have an impact to most people in the town. And you are going to see that there are articles that we refer to sponsor.
Right.
The selectmen do not take a stance on. We don't take a stance on, because there are just things that you just don't.
Well, we don't
Affect
have the
the-
knowledge, we don't
mean,
have the experience.
It's not chickens.
It's not chickens. God, please, don't even say that before
It's
it's
going to be
town
bees.
Yeah,
We
that's
got
just
bumblebee bees coming up.
But the point is, there are certain things that we do not take a stance on, and the select board does not take a stance on
Right.
as well.
Article 9, the culvert, Godfrey Brook on Water Street. That's one that you could call it a no choice. If you're going up Water Street, you have the old telephone building,
Yeah.
and that,
This is really, the neighbors, what is the street there? Mayhew?
That's the left.
The
Yes,
left.
you're right.
The neighbors there, a couple of those neighbors, one particularly on the end, her backyard actually gets so flooded when the brook starts to act up. And, thank God that, Scott and his crew have been proactive, and they actually send somebody out when they know the rains are coming or bad storms coming during the night. They'll send somebody out to make sure the brook is flowing, because if it doesn't flow properly, it actually floods the backyards on that street, which is...
and again, this is something that most people don't know. It's not a town issue.
No.
If you have a brook on your property or adjacent to your property, it's your responsibility to maintain it. So Milford as a town has always said, you can't do that to somebody. You can't go in like here. 2 years ago, we thought this was going to be $700,000. Even at 700, can you imagine going to 2 or 3 people saying either your house floods and gets destroyed or you put up $700,000 to fix it?
Well, and one of the other problems too is that it is part of, only because we have Water Street every year at Milford Beautification Day, and we go right by the brook, as you said, Al, is by the old telephone building, and people, there's shopping carts in there, there's old coolers in there, and that doesn't help the situation either. It's because the brook isn't properly,
But I mean,
secure.
realistically, this is a Milford thing that we made a conscious decision decades ago to say, we're not going to put it on the homeowner. Because that could wipe out somebody's equity. Or
Absolutely.
imagine getting, okay, Mike, you got to chip in $250,000 this year. I don't know of many people who would say, okay, no problem, let me get petty cash.
Yeah.
So even though it's not a Milford town responsibility, Milford as a town takes responsibility.
Being good Samaritans.
And you don't have a choice. I mean, you feel bad for the people with the houses getting flooded, but realistically, you can't flood Water Street either.
Yeah.
And we're going to have another one coming up where we talk about Central Street.
But you know, Al, that article is a classic example that I say to people that live in this community don't realize how lucky they are to live in this community. And there's a classic example of where the town of Milford, you know, steps up and says, you know what, that's not right.
Yeah.
If there were a large number of homeowners that were affected and you were talking about a $10,000 or $20,000 levy, you might be able to make that argument with a straight face. But you put another zero on that,
Yeah.
But even then, the principle of saying, okay, because it's in your backyard, it's 10, 20 grand. Well, the person down the street, it's 200 grand. So how do I justify doing it for you and not for them, or for them not for you? It's Milford. You know, we joke about the Milford way. When we get up in certain things, we say that's just not Milford.
And that's why Mike's 100%. Like, and I'm not throwing stones at another town, but you have Hopedale who closed the Mellon Street Bridge. The Mellon... Do you know how many people use the Mellon Street Bridge?
But again, you're back to Mike's argument.
That's
You got
my
$100.
point. I'm complimenting him on what he said. Like, they closed the Mellon Street Bridge because they weren't willing to spend the money. Do you know what the commuter rate on the Mellon Street Bridge was at the time? But they were like, yep, no, we're all set. But to Mike's point, Milford says that isn't what we do. We fix it for our residents.
Look at our bridge on Central Street.
Yeah,
Look
we're
at the
going to talk
traffic-
about that
the
next.
traffic count that came back.
Exactly.
We didn't say, oh, we're not doing that. We said, okay, back to the drawing board.
But this one especially, and Central Street that we'll talk about, we voted 2 years ago, we put the money away, and then when we went out to bid, it went from 700 to $1 million.
Right.
now, of course, Chris, you got to keep in mind, I think Hopedale's had like 2.5 overrides
Oh,
in
yeah.
the last 6 years. And what do we call 2.5 in
Profanity.
Profanity. Andy, you're 100% right. I mean, and I understand that, but still, I just wanted to compliment Mike because that's really what we do in Milford. We actually take care of what our residents' needs are, and if we have to, if it costs us something, we do it.
Right.
Article number 10 is a redo. That was brought up at the fall town meeting, where it should have been for capital, because we
Right.
really normally don't vote on capital articles in the spring, because we don't know how much money we got. They weren't ready, so we asked the library to postpone it till the spring, which made it a special circumstance, so it could be considered in the spring. And this is for their fire suppression system. And it's always funny because they talk about, well, this is a wet system, not a dry system. And when I heard that, I thought it was like when I had my boat, I had a dry system, it was Halion. Okay, you know, Halon. No, it's just the ends of the sprinklers, whether they're kept in air, which lets them rot, or kept in water. But at the end of the day, the price went from $100,000 to $170,000, and that's what they're asking for. They haven't changed the scope at all, but now it's $170,000. School Committee Building Committee, number 11. Anybody want to explain why we're doing this? It's pretty simple. The SBA says you have to have a building committee, and it will consist of the following members,
Correct.
or we won't fund you. So 40% of close to $200 million is at risk if you don't have a building committee.
Right.
And
This is one of the criteria set by the state.
we got invited to participate in the first step. The first step is feasibility study, which will come up next, and having the school committee, building committee set up. This does nothing but set up the building committee that's going to run the project.
That's correct.
And there's specific rules as to FinCom member, select board member, 3 or 2 people from the community.
Yep, general public, yep. Superintendent.
Article 12 ties right to Article 11, feasibility study. Now, 2 years ago, we put money away in the short-term stabilization. And for people to understand, we have our stabilization. But you brought up the fire truck. We wanted to park money when we had a good years, so we came up with the short-term stabilization so that we kept our bank account protected. And we put in, back then, $1.2 million of funds so that the day we got invited, the first criteria is, can you get it funded? And it's easier to say, yeah, we already have the money in the bank. Unfortunately, it went up by $500,000.
But you know, Al, Chris brings up a good point when he talks about, we were talking earlier about salaries and the hours that the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board, you know, spends on town business. And this is a classic example of where you need the Finance Committee. Sometimes the Finance Committee, or almost all the time, is like a bench coach. We're so focused on things that are going on in the community, whether it's events we're attending, meetings we're attending, and we need the Finance Committee, you know, working right alongside of us, saying things like this, hey, you got this, you know, coming, but this is what we're gonna do. To your point, we're gonna take $750,000, we're gonna tuck it over here, we're gonna let it sit there for a year, so that we know as we're conducting business on a day-to-day basis, that when that day comes, we know the Finance Committee's got our back. They got that money tucked away in an account, so we're good.
And unfortunately, it's gone up to 2.7 million. Now, they're estimating the feasibility study would probably be 2.5, but the worst thing that can happen is you go out to bid and you don't have enough money to cover it.
Right.
Because then you get kicked out of the line.
Mm-hmm.
So we went up to asking town meeting for 2.75. I feel comfortable because if it comes in at 2.4, 2.5, that excess money comes back to the town. It can't be spent.
Right.
That's one of the things people always ask is, when they have extra money in a project, can they spend it on other things? No. We would fight that tooth and nail to say, if it comes in under 2.75 million for the feasibility study, it goes back to the general fund, not diverted to other projects.
And again, to get back to that, Al, that's why, and it's very unique in the town of Milford, that a lot of departments will turn that money back in and not try to spend it, because they know that when they come to the Finance Committee, they come to the Select Board the following year with a request, that you're willing to listen to them.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street, you know.
And you have to,
Trust.
because it's the trust, it's the credibility. You know, when the Finance Committee gives their word. Now, the Finance Committee, I've always said, is the most influential, powerless people in Town Hall, because we get 1 vote out of 200. But I think people understand that we are looking for the long term.
Right.
In stabilization, I don't know if you've explained that, Al. In simple terms, it's cash and other investments that we have put aside over a period of many years that is now sitting somewhere around $30 to $40 million.
About 38.
We're going to use some of that money for the feasibility study, and we may need to consider tapping into some of that to contribute to the cost of the high school renovation.
When we roll to Article 13, this is a sensitive issue. This is the youth center. And we still have a problem with water infiltrating. Now, we're suing the architect, we're suing the contractor, we're suing the birds, the bees, and the dogs and cats. Right. But in the meantime, we got to fix it, because the water is just going to make the problem worse and worse.
What we've already spent.
Yeah. I personally went and Jen Ward, the director of the youth center, showed me a thing, and it's all in the, what do you call it, the front house? What is it?
The head house.
The head house. Thank you. I apologize.
Yeah, the head house.
The head house. And you're looking, and there is literally nothing on the walls, because they had to take everything down. because the water infiltration from the top has come down and just taken care of everything in there.
Well,
Soaked it.
if you go to the basement and look at those long torpedo tubes,
Yeah.
you realize the armory was built on a stream.
Absolutely.
That too.
I mean,
Yeah.
So it doesn't help when you have a stream underneath you and you have rain. But she showed it to me, and literally the head house, I mean, the whole front of it is gone. We cannot conduct activities with kids going in there all the time if we don't repair this.
and we already got $5-6 million invested in the building.
Yep.
You can't just walk away and say,
Yeah.
just kidding.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course, that theory makes me a little nervous.
Of course it does.
That, you know, you have to be confident that the building is going to be structurally integral, right? And that we're not going to be spending $1 million every other year. Otherwise, you know,
I
that's
agree,
saying
but if
throwing
we
good
don't
money
spend
after
this
bad.
million now, we know we're going to have a disaster.
Yeah.
A major problem.
Yeah.
Right.
We roll to Article 14, zoning bylaw. Now, this is one that the Finance Committee did not take a favorable position on. It took a refer to sponsor because it's really not a financial issue. Now, if you happen to have people behind you with sports courts and tournaments in the residential area, it's a sensitive issue because come 9, 10 o'clock at night, when those lights are on and your kids can't go to sleep.
But you know what, Al? This is a great article that shows how town meeting is set up. And this is, to your point, Al, you say if you're the person with the spotlight shining in your backyard, that is where you need to get with your town meeting member. Whoever he or she is in your neighborhood, that's your town meeting representative. You need to express to them your concerns so that town meeting member brings it to town meeting. That's
And
what
if you
town
don't
meeting
know
is
who it
for.
is, again, Town Hall, publish a book every year,
Right.
lists out, I'd say 8 or 10 per precinct or more. So you can look and say, okay, I know this person, or I can get a hold of these people.
Right.
And we roll into Article 15, the roof at Blackstone Valley. $10 million.
I'll tell you right now, Fitzy has done the most incredible job at Blackstone Valley Tech of keeping maintenance, infrastructure improvements within their budget. They have done everything. They use their kids. I mean, who else do you
And
have
the
better?
good news is they don't come to us very often.
You know?
No.
And this is something that's going to be absorbed by the 13 towns and communities that are involved in this. It's something that needs to be done. They have not had a bond in 13.
And the key
Years,
to
I think.
understand is we talk
Yeah.
about 10 million. Right now, we're not sure how much the SBA is going to reimburse Blackstone.
Right.
So we're going for our, I think it's 130 or 125,000,
Yes.
which would be our 1/13th share.
Yep.
But it could be a lot less.
Right.
Because if the SBA comes through with their normal 40% school building administration, then you would knock down 40% of that 125. But at the end of the day, the roof is 30 years plus. It
Gotta
needs
be
it-
fixed.
It's got to
Yeah.
be fixed.
Yep.
And Fitzy's a magician, so he's getting his 40%.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we roll into Article 16. This is one where the town gets money back.
Correct. Correct. And the only conversation personally that I've had on this, that people do agree with this, it's a little bit about an interest. At the end of the day, my feeling on it is, you know what, let's just take the money back, give the gentleman back his building, and let's move down the
Well,
street.
we bought 3 buildings for a parking lot.
Right.
This is the furthest one in the corner. And now the board, select board and everybody said, we don't really need that space.
Right. We don't.
And the owner wants it back. He's been renting it from us.
Right.
So the idea is, he's been paying, I guess, a pilot, paying us what he would pay in taxes.
Correct.
We would sell it to him for the $270 we bought it from him, and eliminate getting, sorry Andy, lawyers involved, because you never know where that's going.
Yeah.
So better that we just say, we don't really need it. We took it because we thought we needed it.
But now we don't.
Now we don't. Give it back to the Milford resident and take the money.
Right.
Number 17. This one is a scary movie. PFA remediation. If people don't know what PFA or PFOAs are, there's a link in the Finance Committee report. Learn. They're forever chemicals. When we were kids, they found that one of the best insecticides ever known was DDT and DDE, very nonpolar fluorocarbon. It got into the system and stayed there. So it killed all the bugs. Problem was, the birds ate the bugs, the animals ate the birds, the people ate the animals, and it got into your fat layer and caused very bad things to happen to your body. They're finding that PFAs, now they're like Teflon, are accumulating in people's system. The limit that you can have is parts per trillion. I spent 2 years working on assays for PFAs and PFOAs, and there's no way of filtering it. The best you can do is knock it down by passing it through carbon. So we have a $250,000 request by the water company to bring in consultants to develop a system for removing PFAs. Do I want to spend it? Hell no. Do I have a choice? I don't think so.
Are we under some sort of EPA mandate? Do we know what exactly is the legal status of this thing?
We know what the legal limits are. I can't remember how many PPTs it was, but I don't know that they've mandated that towns who are above the limit, but do you want your kids above the limit?
Well, I mean, I guess that raises the question of, is the limit a realistically high or low limit? You know, because
Yeah.
there's always a concern, right, that they're over-regulating. And I don't know, you'd know this issue better than I as far as the chemical compounds.
They're
and all
going to
that
have
sort of thing.
to, it's going to be like the issues we had with DDT, where eventually it comes out and you say, you got to deal with it. So this is the tip of the iceberg, because you put in the activated carbon filters and it knocks it down, but now you got to replace the activated carbon filters. How often? Well, it depends on the levels that are finally agreed to. But at least this gets you going. The 250,000 gets a study done.
Now, I just want to quickly point out, and you did a great job pointing out in here, the only people who are going to be paying this are the people who use Milford water.
Yes.
So if you have a well, this has nothing to do with you. You're not paying this fee.
Right.
You will not be
It's-
affected whatsoever.
But unlike sewer, I think 90-some% of the town uses water.
Well,
But the
You're
people,
right,
you're
but I
right.
just wanted to
People who
just
aren't using Milford town
give a shout
water
out.
don't
Right.
pay for this.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, 18, school committee, Norfolk Aggie. School committee underestimated, because you can never know till the kids sign up, how many kids were going to Norfolk Aggie. So they're asking, at $27,000 a person. I mean, that amazes me when you start.
Well, sending your kid to Holy Cross, it's like 4 times
Well,
that.
but I mean, realistically, you're asking for $100,000 extra because of 4 kids.
Yeah.
School committee can't anticipate how many kids want to go to Norfolk Aggie.
Right.
And they can't stop them.
Right. School
You know.
choice.
So
Yeah.
there's $100,000.
Unfortunately, that's something that, once again, as you mentioned, it's
You're right,
nothing
though.
you can anticipate. It's
I'd
nothing you
love to
can
send
plan.
them to UMass, get them their college, because it's about the same price.
It's all about being a crusader, though.
There you go.
19.
Article 19, contractor's yard. Again, it's putting regulations, if people are doing construction, what they can put in the yard they're working on. Because if your neighbor's doing construction or somebody in the neighborhood, you don't want a work zone. Article 20, Central Street Bridge. Most people don't know that we have a Central Street Bridge. It's a tunnel, but they call it a bridge. It's been deteriorating. 2 years ago, we allocated 1.7 million, town meeting did, I say we. We went out to bid, 3 bids came in at 2.9 million. It's gotten to a point of deterioration that we are on the, my understanding is the shortest inspection cycle by the state, that they come out every quarter, and at any point, I don't know what the tripwire is, but they could say, shut it down.
You know, Al, I may not always agree with you on what's necessary on town expenses. This one is necessary. This is a basic infrastructure item, and we're at risk of structural lack of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, when we thought about, well, how many cars go up Central Street? 10, 20 a day? When they did the study,
It was,
it was like 100,000 cars.
Yes, 125. I remember.
125?
Seriously.
Yeah.
So now we're going to try, Scotty came up with an option where the 3 million was doing half of Central Street, one lane, and then doing the other lane. He's going to try and cut back the expense by 300,000 by doing them both,
Yeah.
which means Central Street would be shut down for 60 to 90 days. But that seems worthwhile to save hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right. And I say all the time, if people question how much activity Central Street gets, just go park on the top of the hill some morning with a cup of coffee around 6:30 to 7 o'clock and look down and watch Central Street,
Yeah.
you know.
Now, Article 21, it's an article by the fire chief that he would like to increase the amount of experience needed. Again, who's to question the fire chief? If he thinks,
Well, you know, Al, and Chief Nelson, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Chief Nelson made a valid point when he brought this to us. The way the system is currently set up with the fire chief, deputy chief, and then lieutenants. Well, number one, he doesn't have enough lieutenants, but with with the next level of authority, being lieutenant, what do you do now when you have a serious situation and 2 lieutenants show up? Who's the authority? Well, they currently work well together, but somebody should be.
and you're jumping the gun on me,
Oh,
because that's the next article,
Well-
which is to fund the use of captains.
right,
But this one basically said, for you to be a lieutenant or a captain,
correct,
you need at least 5 years' experience.
right. But it's all worked.
It's
into
all the same,
trying to get to
the next level.
Right.
And realistically, I mean, Chief Nelson's been such a straight shooter with us.
Great human being.
You know, I mean, he really kept in the tradition of TUI Rev 1 and TUI Rev 2, that we could have honest discussions like, do you really need that fire truck this year?
Yeah.
No, I can wait a year. Or do you really need the $350,000 brush truck? Well, no, because we got a surplus truck for 50 grand from the Army.
Yeah.
You can't ask for a better partner than we've got with Robbie Tassino and
Yeah.
the police and Mark.
Right.
So this basically moves it up to 5 years' experience before you can become a captain or a lieutenant.
Right.
Article 22, I want to save time for Article 23, so I'll cut this one short. The power company has a contract with us that they pay at least $1 million a year. If the assessment goes higher, they pay more. So we have to pay somebody, an independent auditor, to come in and say, your power company is worth $100, so therefore you pay X dollars in taxes. Otherwise, we are leaving money on the table.
Right.
For 4 years, we've been lucky that the person who was doing it at bargain rates, and then he retired. So at this point, it's going to be 25 grand that we need to do. Now, Article 23, Andy, you're on.
Where to begin? So the Geriatric Authority runs the Countryside Nursing Home. Geriatric Authority And the nursing home used to be a town department many years ago. They were separated from the town about 40 years ago and spun off into an independent authority. So they run their own business, they pay their own bills. About 20 years ago, 15 years ago, the town started borrowing money to improve the facility, even though it had already become an independent entity, which is a little bit unusual. But we now have $11 million in debt as a result of the improvements that the town funded. Starting around COVID 3 years ago, the geriatric authority started running into financial trouble. We formed a subcommittee. The town has given them money to cover some of their losses. So in addition to the $11 million that we borrowed to fund the renovations, we've given them an additional $5 million of town money as effectively as a gift to cover losses over these last 3 years. There are 360 nursing homes in Massachusetts, which is about one per town. We have 3 in this town. There are only 2 left in the state where the towns are subsidizing, us and Nantucket. So this is really sort of a relic of an era that has long since passed. The nursing home industry is now predominantly run by the private sector. 50% or more of the residents are not from Milford. We're funding those people. There are no assurances that individuals in Milford can get into the facility if they wanted to. And as we talked about, as Mike mentioned before, the budgets are getting tighter. You take it from one spot, you're giving it to another area. So the Finance Committee looked at this, and we think that the town has already done a lot for Countryside, more than we were obligated to do. We've tried to help them on their way. But we think that resources are limited. We think there's better uses of the town funds. So we've opposed this request for an additional $800,000 to fund their ongoing losses.
And realistically, when we say 800, they're losing $250,000 a month for the last few years.
Yes, the losses have been lesser the last few months. We don't know if that's a long-term
Last
trend.
month it was 95.
Right.
But that's 1 month. And there's no plan that says we're going to deal with the changing paradigm. I mean, in the old days, it cost about $300 for a resident. Medicaid, I think, paid us $250, so we lost money on every Medicaid patient.
But you know what's important too, Alan, I don't mean to cut you off, but the other thing, and people say this, when we use terminology that COVID changed the world, here is a classic example, because when this first started to happen, one of the arguments that we had was, as you know, the rehab section of the Countryside had been shut down because they said that, well, there's no reason, that's not really a necessity, you've got to run the nursing home. Well, the money is made in the rehab section. Well, what happened was, what did the insurance companies learn? You talk to anybody that's having a hip done, a shoulder done, a knee done, where are they getting their rehab now? At home. And the reason why is because the insurance companies figured out they don't have to be somewhere for a week. We can send them home.
And that's what kept it going.
So we've got that coming at us too. So you really,
and that's what I mean by the changing paradigm.
Right.
$250 Medicare, almost $300 Medicaid, $250, almost $300 Medicare, the $600 a day. When my mother had her knees done, she got put there for a week. So that $600 a day funded the losses.
Yeah, balanced.
But now all of a sudden the hip replacement, and they're trying to make it day surgery.
Right.
Which worries me about the people, but from a financial point of view, we're not getting the $600 a day that we can subsidize. And the problem I have, last year we added $250 to every tax bill to cover what we gave, because it's $80 per million.
$80 per million. We came up with that, which I think is a good way of explaining to the taxpayer. Every time we appropriate $1 million of taxpayer money,
You just added $80
just
to your
added
tax bill.
to the average taxpaying household, right?
But now you turn around and say, there's the people who built Milford living on Social Security, $200 is a lot of money.
A lot of money.
So this is going to be a really emotional argument, because a lot of us, your wife, my mother,
Right.
My mother-in-law.
your mother-in-law have all been there, and it's so convenient to drive 1 mile. But to be fair, we've got to consider the people living on $1,500 a total a month. Adding $200 a year to their bill, it's a
Now,
hardship.
I hate to say it like I'm Spock, because but to be honest with you, it's exactly the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. We have 30,000 people in this town. We have 2,000 school people. We have people on Social Security, everything else. We have 20 people there. Do I care about them? Of course I care about them. Do I want them to have what they need? Yes. But I'm sorry. We sold Pine Street School, or not Pine Street,
Purchase Street.
Purchase Street School, because you know what? We should not be in the real estate business. We have enough problems controlling what we have to handle now. We shouldn't be in the real estate. We certainly shouldn't be in the medical care business, because let me tell you, the people in the medical care business are having a hard enough time doing it themselves.
And they're professionals.
And they,
Exactly.
exactly, and they're professionals. And no offense to the 7 board members. Like I said, I can't say enough about Dave Consigli and the rest of the board. They have done a phenomenal job. Phenomenal. They're magicians. I don't know how they've been open this long. But eventually you have to say, guys, we're just not good at this. And it's not because they're not good at it. It's because Medicaid and the government have not given us the
Paradigm has
ability to do
shifted.
it.
We're not getting the $600
Exactly, and that's
a
why
day.
Mike is 100% right with that.
Okay.
You know?
We'll take this up at the town meeting
Well, that's why I
next.
say, that's why it needs to go to town meeting floor.
Town meeting, I said it 3 years ago, has to decide what is it worth to have the geriatric authority in Milford.
Right.
And take into consideration the people who are living on Social Security and the people like us that it's hard to say it wasn't really, really nice to drive 1
Yep,
mile
absolutely.
to see a loved one.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So now 24, we're running out of time, but 24 is electric vehicle charging stations. Basically, it's setting the rules up saying you have to have at least X spaces, and this is how you have to set it up
Right.
for electric charging stations.
Right.
25, the Benjamin Moore area cleanup. We thought we put away millions of dollars and did the remediation, and here we go a few years later, the state comes back and says, not so fast. We want you to reconsider and redo. So Benjamin Moore now is going to cost us at least another $250,000 to evaluate what has to be done to clean it up. 26, the special legislation for promotions, we already talked about it.
Right.
27, oh, wait a minute, no, 26 is police. Police chief has come back and said there are certain functions that people, as they get older, can still carry out adequately. You know, when they're at voting booths. Because I know people were worried that, okay, somebody's going to be 60 years old, can they be driving a frontline cruiser chasing criminals? Chief Tassino said, I wouldn't assign them to that.
Right.
But they certainly can help at voting booths and things on that
Correct.
line. And he's having a hard time getting people to do that job.
Right.
28, bumblebees. At first, it seems like an easy, not a big deal issue, but I've got 2 people in my house that are very allergic to bee stings. If my neighbor put a hive or hives on the property line,
I didn't tell you I was doing that.
yeah.
Sorry.
If Chris decided he's going to do bumblebees, how do you tell the bees not to fly over the property line?
Right.
I hope there's not going to be a chicken debate and take 2.5 hours, but 29, snow and ice is always emotional. And people always ask, why is it that you can never predict it right? Because we don't want to. It's the only budget by law that we can overspend. And it's the only budget that you can't reduce.
Right.
Once it goes up to like 600,000, next year you can't make it 550. So my report a year or 2 ago was, It snowed, we had people remove the snow, now we gotta pay for it.
Right.
It's just that simple. We don't budget $1 million or $2 million for the odd years that really snows hard, because then you can't spend the money that year.
Right.
And the last two articles are admin. We started out saying, town meeting giveth, and town meeting must taketh away. So, like, we have $2.7 million ask for the feasibility study. If it turns out we only spend 2.4, that extra money has to be brought back by town meeting. It sits in an account, but nobody can spend it, and we can't absorb it unless town meeting approves it.
Right.
So this year, almost 2.3 million, because the Brookside project was almost 2 million of it, that we ended up doing it for $2 million less than we thought. So here comes the money, and it can be absorbed by the town, if town meeting agrees, and then used for other funding. And the last one, by law, as a department head, you are legally responsible to have a balanced budget. Now, years ago, the town meeting split budgets between personnel salaries and stuff. So to move money from personnel to stuff, or from stuff to personnel, to balance your budget, takes town meeting vote. That's what Article 31 is. Zach goes through all the budgets, sees who's missing money here and there, and reallocates it.
Right.
Well, proposes to reallocate it. We've got a minute left.
Nice job, Al.
Any comments?
The only thing I want to say, and I said it earlier, I think people don't see a change in services, but they're going to see a change in their taxes. Okay? And Al and Mike and Andy, you guys know this. We just took 33% of our excess levy capacity and just used it this year. We haven't even paid for a school yet. We haven't even paid for a school yet. And we just took 33% of our excess levy capacity. And once again, and we talked about it earlier, like the price of going to McDonald's, it's the same thing. The price of everything for our town has gone up. And I want the Milford taxpayers to know that we're providing you the same services, but just understand that those services are more expensive. And, you know, we provide them to you and we want you to have them, but just know they cost a little bit more. And unfortunately, you're going to have to pay it.
Things like Scotty at the Highway Department, the price of hardtop almost doubled.
Right.
So the $1 million he has to do streets,
Yep.
now he can do 3 streets instead
Exactly.
of 5 streets.
Yep.
Right.
But, you know, we do the best we can.
Do a
We'll
great
see.
job.
Well, town meeting, over the years, those 200 people have been very, very helpful. Because they seem to keep their heads on straight with the help of the department heads. Because again, I mean, we went to the school this year. I was waiting. You know, because their preliminary budget was going up like 13 or 18%. I was waiting, this is going to be a battle. And Chris Wilson and Kevin McIntyre started out saying, we've been lucky the last 2 years. We understand we can't spend that kind of money this year. And they came to us and said, we can get down to 7.5% increase. And we didn't play games. We said, well, the best we can do is 6.5. But it's not a negotiation. Our rock hard number is 6.5. And I remember at the very end, they came and said, we're at 6.8. I said, great, only 0.3% to go.
Okay. And Mike and his board has been phenomenal. And the department heads, I mean, just ridiculous how they turn water into wine.
Right.
You know,
So
they really do.
come Monday, the 20th, we'll go through these articles, not at breakneck speed like we did now. Tune in. Watch how your money's being spent. We're spending $152 million of Milford money and 161 total million of expenses. You should know what your representatives are voting on. And then please get out and vote. I mean, anybody who says their vote doesn't matter should take a look and say the school committee this year was 2 votes. Chris Wilson won by 2 votes. So, as always, thank you for joining. To our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Good night, all, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Al.